Right now, Mayor Bloomberg loses the battle on stop and frisk, first in the courts, then in the city council. Will police oversight make New York City better or worse? And next, the race for City Hall coming down to the wire. We're going to break out a strategy session and give each of the candidates a little free advice. And later, President Obama doesn't have any plans to campaign for Barbara Buono should the president insert himself in New Jersey's gubernatorial race. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday evening, August the 23rd. We begin tonight with stop and frisk. The New York City Council overriding Mayor Bloomberg's veto pen yesterday, meaning that a watchdog for the police department will soon be created, and it'll become easier for people to file profiling lawsuits against the NYPD. It is the most aggressive legislative effort in years to try and police the police. And the vote came less than 2 weeks after a federal judge imposed new oversights of her own. Reactions opposing that city council vote today were swift and emotional. From the Daily News' front page, which read, "There will be blood," to the New York Post's, which said, "Good day for thugs." We're going to bring in our panel on this tonight. First up, Scott Levinson, president and founder of the Advance Group. Dominic Carter is with us, political journalist and author, and Rich Valdez, former official in the Chris Christie administration and columnist for the Washington Times community section. Thank you all for being here. First of all, no surprise from the city council and the vote that was expected. Any surprise to the reaction that we've gotten in the media, the front page editorials from both the Post and the Daily News?
No, I mean, I think it's a continuation of the fear-mongering that's gone on around this legislation. If you look back historically, it was very similar to what happened at the institution of the Civilian Complaint Review Board. CCRB was going to create that chilling effect on policing, and if you had too many complaints from citizens, it was really going to jam you up if you were an officer, and this was going to be the end of policing as we know it. The thugs were going to take over, and you've heard much of the same fear-mongering around this bill as well. And the fact is, stop and frisk will continue. It just won't continue in the way it's currently been implemented. And the fact is, the courts have ruled the way it's been implemented has been unconstitutional. And if you look at the numbers, that's pretty clear. So if there's a reasonable suspicion, you can still search somebody. And that's how the law should be implemented.
Rich, the papers were certainly taking their lead from Mayor Bloomberg, who basically argued that these kinds of laws or oversights would make the city less safe. Do you think the mayor has to scale back some of that rhetoric at this point?
Well, just to step back, I'm going to reserve judgment on Judge Shindlin as a jurist and just say I don't know where this is going to end up with Bloomberg's continued attempts to advance it. But I think the mayor is spot on. I mean, this is a careful balancing act between one's rights under the Fourth Amendment and racial profiling. And it's a dangerous game. But I do think those that are in law enforcement know best, and all of them have said this is bad policy.
Well, I mean, if all you do is say that those in law enforcement know best, you open a can of worms for a whole bunch of violations of people's civil liberties. There has to be some checks and balances, obviously, you'd agree.
There's always going to be checks and balances. But you, nor I, nor Dominic, or Andrew could go out there and tell cops how to do their job to keep people safe.
Well, in fact, that's why you have political entities, a commissioner that's appointed that's not necessarily a member of the force, that's appointed by the mayor. So there is accountability for just that reason. And
the commissioner is for stop and frisk, just as is the mayor.
Dominic, we know that the mayor has doubled down hard on stop and frisk so far, but now you've got the city council and a federal judge. At some point, he's got to come off the gas a little bit with this, doesn't he?
Not at all. No, he doesn't. He's going to ride into the sunset. In 4 months, he will dig in his heels even more. The mayor's not going to back up. Well, frankly, if you're arguing his point of view, why would you? Now, I adamantly disagree with his point of view. And as far as those headlines that you raised the question, tabloid journalism. But frankly, what goes through my mind is, yeah, you can print that crap, but how many of your kids are going to be stopped and thrown up on the wall? Because it's happened to my son. So, you know, and I know you understand, all of us understand the community well. Scott Levinson, somebody who's been in the community for a very long time. But you know, the mayor's not going to back up. The election, it's almost irrelevant what he has to. I know that sounds bad, but his days are numbered. So it's a new mayor coming in.
There was a bit of a cliche in Brooklyn about 10 years ago where it was a crime driving black.
Mm-hmm.
driving black was a reason to be stopped in Brooklyn.
And in New Jersey in the 80s
And there was
too.
and to District Attorney Hines' credit, he did a whole effort to retrain the police department, inform them of rights. But that's why you need this checks and balances, because sometimes when you're in uniform and you're in the streets every day, your perspective is not always clear. You need to have a political entity. that can
Hines has
oversee
been
that.
very innovative in terms of working with the community in Brooklyn, community courts and taking the court. He's been very involved. It's rare when we see a district attorney working that closely with the community, and he's done it.
Arguably
But there's no
progressive, yeah,
positive
that's
argument
right.
for driving while black. That's just simply bias. There is the argument that we're hearing that stop and frisk, despite the numbers, has a safety component and
Well,
might.
Andrew, that's really dangerous territory too. If it's a violation of
is.
one's civil liberties, it's a violation of one's civil liberties. Obviously, you can stop 100 people because they're black. One could have a gun under their seat. That doesn't mean that the policy of stopping them is correct.
Of course, the political ramifications with the mayoral election coming up, the biggest impact is on the Democratic side, where the candidates have nuanced positions. Everybody says they're against stop and frisk, but to varying degrees. Let me look forward to the general election on this. Is this a potential third rail for Republicans, whoever the nominee happens to be coming out of the GOP, embracing stop and frisk too hard?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I think all of them have embraced stop and frisk, and at this point, they'd be backpedaling if they didn't continue to support it. Whether or not it's going to be one of the top issues, I don't think so. I think this is going to end up in the courts, and we're just going to wait for it to come back to us. I don't know it's something they're going to be able to campaign about any further.
You're going to see both sides in the fall campaign. They're going to hope that their position will energize their base. For argument's sake, let's say Joe Loder's the Republican nominee. Polling shows him with a double-digit lead. We don't know what's going to happen. Tonight we'll talk to George McDonough, and Catsimatidis is in the race as well. But let's say he's the nominee, Loder. What you're going to do is you're going to say, I want to keep this city safe. And these far-left Democrats, all they want to do is tax and spend and more crime. So you're going to try and energize your base, people that
It's a pretty good message, by the way.
yeah, that's pretty good, right? And if you're the Democrat, if let's say for argument's sake the nominee is the son with the afro, de Blasio. Let's say he's the nominee. He's far left. He's going to scream bloody murder, and he's going to hope that that's going to energize black and I'm not saying he's the nominee because I don't buy it what these polls are showing. But they're going to use that to energize their base. Each side wants to energize their base.
Scott, nobody's involved in the Democratic primary buildup like you are, whether pro-candidates or anti-candidates, as the case may be. Where are Democratic voters in the city on stop and frisk, and do you expect to see movement from the candidates on their positions trying to better hone in on where they think the pulse of the voter is?
Well, first of all, Andrew, the Democratic primary electorate is not the Democratic general electorate. And it's hard for people to really understand how left-leaning the primary electorate are. Those Democrats that just vote in Democratic primaries, those what we call super prime Democrats, those most likely to vote this fall, are by almost definition disproportionately minority, disproportionately progressive, disproportionately union members. That's who comes out in Democratic primaries. So by definition, to echo Dominic's thought, in addition to energizing their base, the challenge that a Democrat has in the fall is to moderate their behavior at the same time without alienating their base.
But we're about 2.5 weeks away from the primary on the Democratic side. Is it advantage to whoever is the most opposed to stop and frisk among the Democratic candidates?
No doubt about the most progressive candidate in a Democratic primary often is advantaged in a two-way race. The dynamics are particularly interesting this year because with only 18 days left, you still have 3 candidates who are competitive for the lead within the margin of error, depending on what the polls say. And that's a real tricky dynamic in just game theory on how that's going to play out, who voters are going to see as wasting their vote at the end, because typically it breaks out about this time.
Is stop and frisk the issue that tilts the scale one way or another in the Democratic primary?
Stop and frisk, hospital closings will be down towards the end, and the vision of the city, how close to Bloomberg.
And what will be interesting, though, Thompson has been the moderate in terms of stop and frisk. The fall campaign is where it might benefit him.
Absolutely.
Because he can say, listen, when the Republican candidate is out there screaming that they're going to just give the city to criminals, he can say, listen, the police unions endorsed me. I'm the voice of moderation. I'm going to end stop and frisk, but at the same time, I'm going to continue it.
There's just one huge if to that whole scenario. That's if he's the nominee, if he manages to get through the primary and get through the runoff if there is one. We're going to keep this conversation going online. We want you to head over to Facebook and Twitter. Sound off. Will NYPD oversight mean better policing or a less safe city? But up next, what do each of the Democratic candidates for mayor have to do to make it across the finish line? And maybe we'll only focus on 3 of the candidates at this point. Is the key more advertising? Do they have to do more outreach to minority voters? What is the message that needs to get through? Our strategy session on the Democratic side is next. Stay with us.